When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Elias Makos Show. Now it's 2025. It's got a nice ring to it, by the way. I love saying it. We are in 2025. Nice number there. But 2025 means that this year will mark the 30th anniversary of the 1995 referendum, right? We all remember that, well, maybe not. I know there's some of you who weren't around when that referendum happened. So for those of you who weren't around listening right now, it was razor close. Oh, so close, by the way, did this country come to splitting up. Now we've all seen that the CAQ government not doing well in the polls. Who's resurgent? It's Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, and the Parti Québécois. And, they're promising another referendum, a third referendum on sovereignty. So what's in the cards as we look back and we look ahead? Charles Breton joins us now, Executive Director of the Centre of Excellence on the Canadian Federation at the Institute for Research on Public Policy. Charles, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, as you look forward here, 2025 and the 30th anniversary, and the promises from some Quebec parties of another referendum, what do you think? Well, what path are we going down here in this province?
2025 will be the year where I think the scenario or the blocks are kind of set for the year after that, when the actual provincial election will happen. Because we have to remember, the election is only in October 2026 at the provincial level, and in all likelihood we'll get to that date. There won't be an election before that, and so 2025 will be, I think, the year. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in terms of who the players will be, actually, right? So we don't even know who's going to be leading the Liberal Party, both at the provincial and the federal level at this time. So there's a lot of uncertainty as to who the players will be. We know that Legault will be there. We know that Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon will be there, as you said, and we know that the Prime Minister at the federal level is likely to be Pierre Poilievre. So those are kind of the known factors, but there's still a lot of uncertainty that I think 2025 will kind of clarify the stage for 2026.
So let me ask you about support, right, for separation in general, because as I look at it, there are two parties in this province, right, that are openly sovereignist. You got the PQ and Quebec Solidaire. Quebec Solidaire, if you look at polling, less than 50% of the people that would vote for Quebec Solidaire are in favor of independence. And then we know that there are a whole bunch of Parti Québécois voters right now. At least they say they're going to vote for the Parti Québécois. But even there, it's not everyone who votes for the Parti Québécois is in favor of independence. Yeah. So
that's an important distinction that we always have to make. And it's especially, people in Quebec tend to kind of know that, but I think it's also important when we talk to the rest of Canada, because people in the rest of Canada tend to always do to see the PQ rising as meaning that sovereignty is rising. But those two things are not the same thing. And as you were indicating, there's a lot of people who support the Parti Québécois who are not sovereigntists, and there are sovereigntists who are supporting other parties. So we can't do a one-to-one when we see the PQ rise in the polls. So support for sovereignty has been actually very stable over the last decade even. There might have been some bumps here and there, but on average, we're looking at 35-40% of support for sovereignty. And we have to remember that although the PQ is looking probably going to form a majority government in 2026, they're only at 33%, right? It's just our electoral system works, right? They're not at 55%. So that's also something that we need to remember, that even if everyone who votes for the PQ was a sovereigntist, that only gets them 33%, right?
So, but Charles, let me ask you it this way, because on Twitter, on X, right, I follow so many hardcore nationalists. They follow me, by the way, because we are aligned on so many issues at times, right?
Yep.
And I see their battles, right? And one of the battles I saw recently, the debate internally between demographics, right? What did the demographics say? Younger voters or not? Well, do you have an answer on that? Like the next generation, are they more for separation or less?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a really big. So if we want to look back at 1995, for instance, and compare now to then for support for sovereignty, that's the big difference. Like I'm going to talk in generalities here, but on average, in 1995, older Quebecers, that's where you found the Federalists. The 60 and plus in 1995, that's where you saw a lot of the hardcore Federalists. It was the older generations. Whereas the younger generation, the younger people in 1995 were highly supportive of sovereignty. Now, things have completely flipped because those people in 1995 have aged, right?
Yeah.
So now in those 60 plus, even like 55 plus, that's where you find a lot of support for sovereignty. Whereas for younger generation, you see much less. But every time I say that, I think it's always important to also mention that although the younger generations, 18 to 35, let's say, are much less supportive of sovereignty than in the past, that doesn't mean that they are Federalists. That younger generation just doesn't know, because this has not been kind of the core clivage in Quebec society for the last 5-10 years. And it's not something that we've been talking about. So when we poll those people, it's not that they're more supportive of federalism or that they're more Federalists. It's just that they don't know or don't have a strong opinion. But they're definitely not as sovereigntist as these 1835 were in 1995.
We're with Charles Breton, Executive Director of the Centre of Excellence on the Canadian Federation. Charles, I want to ask you, what will be the guiding issues? If there is another referendum, what will it be centered on? And feel free to push back, because maybe I'm making some assumptions that are incorrect. I really do feel, like 1995, I felt one of the defining reasons of the independence movement and the referendum was really centered on language. Okay, language is the top of the list. And now more and more, listening to Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, listening to other Quebec nationalists, and recognizing some of the thoughts I've had, by the way, is that there's a growing schism culturally between the rest of Canada and the Justin Trudeau multiculturalism ideal where diversity is strength versus Quebec. And hey, we need to integrate. And we have, there are certain things that are Quebec values. And Bill 21 is really important to create a society that has those values. And I'm seeing that growing schism. And I say to myself, if Quebec were to ever separate, it wouldn't be language; it would be culture. That would be the schism. What do you think on my take?
So I think it would be both, but I think you're right that that cultural aspect, if you want to call it that, would play a significant role that wasn't necessarily there in 1995. I do think that one thing that we'll have to pay attention to that's completely related to that is, I don't know if you remember, but at some point we'll have a Supreme Court decision on Bill 21.
Yes.
And that decision will probably come in 2025, maybe early 2026. And that will be a defining factor of moving forward for sure on that question. Same as what the CAQ decides to do following we haven't talked that much about that report that they had come out in November on constitutional issues and their desire to have a Quebec constitution, which if they were to have one, laïcité would be a big part of it probably.
Yep.
And so those are kind of, again, blocks that will kind of be set for the stage, will set the stage for 2026 and perhaps a future referendum. But I think you're right that that cultural aspect, which wasn't, it was part of there in 1995, but not front and center, would if there were to be another referendum campaign in the future.
And Charles, I keep going back to it's so funny, and it came back into the news this week because there was a separate court case. But I keep going back to the Mike Ward comedian case that went all the way to the Supreme Court and basically put comedy on trial in this country. And the Supreme Court, it wasn't like 9-0. Of course, comedy is allowed. It was 5-4. it was razor close. And I say to myself, man, if there's a schism culturally with Canada on issues like that, where the Supreme Court will go 5-4 on if comedy is allowed, what will they do on Bill 21 and other thing? Bill 96, I guess, will end up down that road as well, and that is a language issue. And I guess it also to wrap up here, it also matters on who the players are. If it's Polyev or it's Carney or whoever it is, right? I guess it's the players who are going to be moving the pieces on the chessboard matter a lot as well.
So that's the big unknown to me. And every time I talk about this question, especially in English in the rest of Canada, outside Quebec, I always mention that this aspect is the big unknown to me. Is if there were to be a referendum on sovereignty, it is clear. It's very unclear who would be fighting for the no side. In Quebec, but outside Quebec as well. Do we see Pierre Poilievre as the kind of the big flag bearer for national unity? Maybe. But at this point, it's unclear how much he cares about that. And the fact that the Liberal Party in Quebec doesn't have a leader, we'll see who that is. There will be one at some point, right? Yeah. But it's hard to see who's leading the charge on the no side moving forward, both outside of Quebec and in Quebec.
And that's a great point on the Liberal leadership, the Quebec Liberal leadership. And I know there's going to be a federal one too. But who leads the Quebec Liberals? Is it someone that has actually gone down the path of more of a following Quebec Solidaire, social justice wise, but is a federalist? Or is it, someone that's very nationalist first and tries to actively court Francophone voters? All of that changes this discussion, doesn't it, as we look ahead?
Absolutely.
Okay, Charles, listen, great discussion. Thanks for coming on. Let's talk again soon, okay?
No problem at all. Thank you.
Charles Breton is Executive Director of the Centre of Excellence on the Canadian Federation at the Institute for Research on Public Policy.